The rope creaked against the old oak beam as Sheriff Kane Hollister's boots hit the porch steps 3 at a time. His heart hammered against his ribs when he saw her delicate frame swaying in the morning wind, her raven hair catching the amber light filtering through the barn's broken slats. Leary lay. The name tore from his throat like a wounded animal's cry. His knife was already in his hand, slicing through the hemp before his mind could process the full horror. She collapsed into his arms, her body still warm, her lips still carrying the faintest trace of the rose oil she'd worn since they were children. The letter clutched in her lifeless fingers fluttered to the hay-strewn floor. He chose another. What else was there to live for? Kane's vision blurred as he pressed his face against her neck, breathing in the scent that had haunted every lonely night since she'd left Millbrook Hollow 5 years ago. The town had whispered she'd gone to the city to become some rich man's wife, that she'd forgotten all about the sheriff's boy, who used to steal apples for her from Widow Crane's orchard. But here she was, back in the old Brennan farmhouse where they'd carved their initials as teenagers, where he'd kissed her for the first time under a canopy of fireflies. Back and believing the cruelest lie ever told. I never stopped loving you, he whispered to her cooling skin, not for one goddamn day. The wedding invitation on the kitchen table mocked him with its elegant cream paper and gold lettering. Sheriff Kane Hollister and Miss Cordelia Thorne request your presence. The date was 3 days away, a marriage arranged by his dying father to unite 2 struggling cattle ranches. A business transaction disguised as love. Kane had sent word to every corner of 3 counties, hoping against hope that Leary would come back, would stop him from making the biggest mistake of his life. But the message that reached her had been twisted by jealous tongues and small-town spite. He lifted her body with trembling arms, carrying her to the rope swing they'd built by the creek. The late September sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber, the same colors as her eyes had been when she'd laughed at his terrible jokes and believed in their impossible dreams. As he laid her gently on the grass, where they'd once talked about running away together, where they'd planned a life free from the expectations and feuds that bound their families, Kane made a silent vow. 3 days wasn't enough time to make this right, but he'd move heaven and earth trying. The sound of hoofbeats on the dirt road made him look up. Cordelia Thorne sat astride her black mare, her pale face a mask of carefully controlled satisfaction. She'd arrived just in time to see the sheriff cradling his childhood sweetheart, and the slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth told Kane everything he needed to know about who had delivered that final, devastating message to Leary. Such a tragedy, Cordelia said, her voice honey-sweet with false sympathy. I suppose the wedding will have to be postponed. Kane's hand moved instinctively to his gun. In that moment, with Leary's blood on his hands and the truth burning like acid in his chest, postponement was the least of Cordelia Thorne's worries. Get down from that horse. Kane's voice carried the deadly quiet that had made hardened outlaws surrender without drawing iron. Cordelia's composure cracked, just enough to reveal the calculation beneath her mourning dove facade. Sheriff Hollister, surely you're not suggesting I'm not suggesting anything? The Colt cleared leather smooth as silk. I'm telling you to get down, and then you're going to explain exactly what you told her. The mare sidestepped nervously as Cordelia dismounted, her riding skirts rustling against the autumn grass. She kept her chin high, but her hands betrayed her with their trembling. I simply delivered the truth. That you were marrying me in 3 days. That you'd chosen a woman who could help your ranch prosper, instead of some fallen dove who'd shamed herself in the city. Fallen dove? The words came out strangled. Kane had seen men die with less pain in their eyes than what Cordelia's casual cruelty revealed. Oh, you didn't know? Cordelia's laugh was crystalline and sharp. You're precious. Leary spent 5 years in a Denver brothel. The Gilded Rose, they called it. Quite the establishment, from what I heard. She came back thinking she could wash away her sins with your love. Poor thing. The gun wavered in Kane's grip. Not from weakness, but from the effort it took not to put a bullet through this woman's black heart. You're lying, it's Jeremiah Pike. He saw her there himself when he was conducting business in Denver. Recognized those distinctive green eyes immediately. Cordelia smoothed her skirts with false calm. She was used goods, Kane. Damaged. Did you a favor by? The slap echoed across the meadow like a gunshot. Cordelia staggered, her cheek blooming red, tears of shock rather than sorrow flooding her eyes. You don't know a damn thing about damage, Kane said quietly. He holstered his weapon and turned back to Liralay's still form. Get out of here before I forget I took an oath to protect even worthless creatures like you, Cordelia remounted, with shaking hands, but her venom wasn't spent. The whole town will know what she was. You can't marry a dead whore, Sheriff. Kane didn't turn around. He was remembering other things now, the letters he'd sent to Denver that had come back marked address unknown. The private detective who'd reported that no Liralay Ashford existed in the city records. The sleepless nights wondering why she'd vanished without a word. If she'd been at the Gilded Rose, it was because she'd had no choice. And if Jeremiah Pike had recognized her, it meant she'd been hiding in plain sight. Was probably using another name, probably sending every penny she earned back to her ailing mother in secret. The pieces fell together like a shattered mirror reassembling itself, each fragment cutting deeper than the last. She'd sacrificed everything, her reputation, her body, her salt, keep her mother alive after the consumption diagnosis. And when the old woman finally passed last spring, Liralay had come home to find the only man she'd ever loved preparing. To marry another woman? I should have looked harder, he whispered to her still face. Should have torn Denver apart stone by stone until I found you. The shadows were growing longer. Soon the townspeople would notice the sheriff's absence, would come looking, would find them here. Kane lifted Liralay again, carrying her toward the farmhouse. There was something he needed to do before the world intruded on their final moments. Together inside the abandoned house, dust motes danced in the fading light. Their initials were still carved deep in the windowsill, KH plus LA forever, below it. In Liralay's delicate script were words he'd never seen before. I kept my promise. Did you keep yours? The promise. Sweet God. The promise he'd made. The night before, she'd disappeared. The memory hit Kane like a physical blow, dropping him to his knees beside the window where their younger selves had dreamed of forever. That last night 5 years ago, when Liralay had come to him wild-eyed and desperate, her mother burning with fever, and the doctor demanding payment they didn't have. Promise me, she'd whispered, clutching his hands in the moonlight. Promise me that no matter what I have to do, no matter how long I'm gone, you'll wait for me. Promise me you'll remember that everything I do is to get back to you. He'd kissed her tears away and sworn on his father's grave that he'd wait until the stars fell from the sky. That he'd never love another. She was his heart, his soul, his every breath. 3 months later, when the engagement to Cordelia had been announced, Liralay must have thought he'd broken that sacred vow. She'd died believing he'd betrayed the most important promise of his life. Kane pressed his face against the windowsill, his shoulders shaking. The carved wood was worn smooth by countless caresses, by all the times she must have come here over the years. Tracing their initials and wondering if he remembered their love, the truth was a knife twisting in his chest. His father had threatened to disinherit him if he didn't marry Cordelia, to leave their struggling ranch to creditors rather than see it pass to a man who'd chosen love over duty. Kane had agreed to the engagement, planning to break it the moment Liralay returned, but she'd never known that. She'd died thinking he'd chosen money over their hearts. I kept it, he whispered to her memory. I kept the promise. I was going to call off the wedding the second you came home. A sound from the doorway made him turn. Old Doc Hennessy stood silhouetted against the dying light, his medical bag in hand, and his weathered face graved with understanding. Son, the doctor said gently, Jeremiah Pike's been running his mouth all over town. Thought you should know. Before the gossips start circling like vultures. Kane wiped his eyes with his sleeve. It doesn't matter what they say about her. Actually, it might. Doc Hennessy stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Pike's lying, boy. Has to be. I delivered that girl myself 24 years ago, and I've been her mother's doctor since she was born. Liralay never went to Denver. She's been in St. Louis this whole time, working as a seamstress in a convent, sending every penny home to keep her mother in medicine. The words hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. What? Sister Margaret, at the Sacred Heart Convent, wrote to me when Liralay's mother passed. Asked me to pass along a message if the girl ever came home. She wanted you to know that Liralay had been working herself to skin and bones for 5 years, refusing every suitor, keeping a vigil candle burning for someone she called her sheriff. Kane staggered to his feet, hope and anguish warring in his chest. Then why did Pike? Because Cordelia Thorne paid him to say it. $500 to destroy that girl's reputation and make sure you went through with the wedding? Doc Hennessy's eyes were hard as flint. The Thorne family's been hemorrhaging money for years. They need your ranch's water rights to survive. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Cordelia hadn't just twisted his wedding announcement into a declaration of betrayal. She'd poisoned Liralay's homecoming with the cruelest lie imaginable. It's making her believe she was returning as a fallen woman to a man who'd never truly loved her. She came back pure, Kane breathed. She came back exactly as she left, and died thinking she wasn't worthy of me. There's more. Doc Hennessy pulled a letter from his coat. Found this on her when I examined the body. Never been opened. Envelope was addressed in Liralay's careful script. To my beloved Kane, if he still wants me. Inside, 3 pages of her heart poured out in ink and tears. Kane's hands shook as he unfolded the letter, Liralay's familiar handwriting blurring through his tears. Her words reached across death itself to break his heart all over again. My dearest Kane, if you're reading this, then I found the courage to knock on your door. Or perhaps you found me too late. And these are the last words I'll ever speak to you. I know you're marrying Cordelia in 3 days. I heard it from her own lips. Heard how you chose practicality over the foolish dreams we shared as children. I don't blame you. A man needs a wife who can stand beside him in daylight. It's not one who's been gone so long the town forgets her name. But I need you to know the truth before I let you go. Every sunrise in St. Louis, I watched the light creep across my tiny room and pretended it was you calling me home. Every coin I earned with my needle and thread was a step closer to keeping my promise to return to you worthy of your love. Mother needed medicine I couldn't afford on a seamstress's wages. So I took work in the evenings playing piano at the Golden Crown Saloon. It's just piano, Kane. I swear on my mother's grave. Just music. But I know how gossip travels. How truth becomes twisted across miles and years. By now they probably say I was a dance hall girl, or worse. I came home with enough saved to buy the old Brennan place to make it beautiful for us again. I was going to wait until after your wedding, then leave this letter on our windowsill and disappear forever. But seeing you in town today, seeing how handsome you've become, how the star on your chest suits you, ... I couldn't leave without telling you that every beat of my heart has been yours since we were 15. If there's any part of you that remembers our promise, meet me at the old farmhouse tomorrow at sunset. If you don't come, I'll understand. I'll take the train back to St. Louis and build a life from the ashes of our dreams. But if you come, oh, Kane, if you come, I'll spend every day of my life making up for the years we lost. Forever yours. Whether you want me or not. Liralee. The letter fluttered from Kane's nerveless fingers. She'd been waiting for him at sunset yesterday. Waiting while he'd been in the church, discussing wedding arrangements with the preacher. Waiting until the sun died and her hopes died with it. Until she believed the silence was his answer. She waited, he whispered. She waited, and I never came. Doc Hennessy placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Didn't know, son. I should have known. Kane sank into the broken chair by the window, the weight of his failure crushing him. I should have felt it when she was hurting. Should have known the moment she came home. What will you do now? The question hung in the gathering darkness. Outside lanterns were flickering to life across Millbrook Hollow as families settled in for another peaceful evening, unaware that their sheriff's world had shattered into 1,000 pieces. What could he do? Liralee was gone, taken by despair and Cordelia's poisonous lies. The wedding was in 3 days, his father's legacy hanging in the balance, the entire town expecting him to fulfill his duty. But as Kane stared at their carved initials, at the promise Liralee had traced with desperate fingers, he felt something stirring in his chest. Not just grief, but rage. Cold, calculating rage that settled in his bones like winter frost. Cordelia Thorne had murdered the only person he'd ever loved as surely as if she'd tied the noose herself. She'd destroyed an innocent woman out of greed, had manipulated him into betraying his own heart, and she thought she'd won. "Doc," Kane said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of reckoning, "I need you to do something for me. Something that's going to seem mighty strange." The old physician leaned closer. "Name it. I need you to examine Liralay's body real careful like. I need you to write up a report saying she died of a fever. Not this." Doc Hennessy's eyes sharpened. "That's asking me to falsify. I'm asking you to help me serve justice. The truth will come out, but it needs to come out the right way at the right time." Kane stood, his hand instinctively checking his gun. "Cordelia Thorne is going to pay for what she's done, but first I'm going to make sure she believes she's gotten away with it. What are you planning, son?" Kane looked one last time at Liralay's still face, memorizing every beloved feature. Then he leaned down and pressed a kiss to her cold forehead, a promise and a vow.
Ow!
"I'm planning to give that woman exactly what she wants," he said. "And then I'm going to destroy her world piece by piece." The church bells of Millbrook Hollow rang out across the valley 3 days later, their bronze voices proclaiming what should have been the happiest day of Sheriff Kane Hollister's life. Instead, he stood at the altar in his finest black suit, watching Cordelia Thorne glide down the aisle in yards of white silk and Belgian lace, her triumph glittering in her eyes like diamonds. She was beautiful, he had to admit. Golden hair piled high beneath her grandmother's pearl-encrusted veil, porcelain skin that had never known honest work, lips curved in the perfect smile of a woman who'd gotten everything she'd ever wanted. The entire town had turned out to witness the union of two of the most prominent families in the territory, if only they knew they were watching a spider marry her prey. "Dearly beloved preacher," Morrison began, his voice carrying across the packed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the joining of this man and this woman in holy matrimony." Kane let the familiar words wash over him, while his mind focused on the weight of the derringer hidden in his boot, the telegram folded in his vest pocket, and the justice that would soon be served. 3 days had given him just enough time to set his trap, to gather the evidence that would expose Cordelia's crime to the world. "Do you, Cordelia, Elizabeth Thorne, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" "I do," she said, her voice clear and sweet as honey over poison. "Do you, Kane Samuel Hollister, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, until death do you part?" Kane looked into Cordelia's eyes, seeing the satisfaction there, the certainty that she'd won. Behind her in the second pew, Jeremiah Pike sat sweating despite the cool autumn air, his lies heavy on his conscience. Near the back, Doc Hennessy waited with grim patience, a sealed envelope in his coat pocket. "I do," Kane said, his voice steady as stone. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Cordelia lifted her face expectantly, her lips parted in anticipation of the kiss that would seal her victory, stepped back, and turned toward the congregation. "Before we seal this union," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the church, "I have something to share with all of you, a truth that needs to be told." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cordelia's smile faltered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Kane, what are you 3 days ago? I found Liralay Ashford dead in the old Brennan farmhouse. Doc Hennessy ruled it death by fever, but that wasn't the whole truth." Kane's hand moved to his vest pocket, withdrawing the telegram. "This morning, I received word from the Denver City Marshal's office. Seems they were mighty interested to learn that someone had been spreading lies about one of their most respected citizens." The church fell silent as death. Cordelia's face went white beneath her rouge. "You see," Kane continued, his voice carrying the weight of judgment, "Miss Ashford was never at any brothel in Denver. She was in St. Louis, working as a seamstress at the Sacred Heart Convent. The good sisters there have provided a full account of her activities for the past 5 years." including copies of every letter she sent home and every dollar she sacrificed. To keep her dying mother in medicine? Jeremiah Pike bolted for the door, but two of Cain's deputies were waiting. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed through the church like gunshots. The truth is, Cain said, turning back to his bride, Lirelei came home pure as the day she left, hoping to find the man who'd promised to wait for her. Instead, she found lies. Poisonous, calculated lies, designed to make her believe she wasn't worthy of love. Cordelia tried to speak, but no words came. Her perfect composure cracked like a broken dam. She didn't die of fever, Cain said quietly. She died of a broken heart, believing I'd betrayed our love. And the woman responsible for that lie is standing right here in this church, wearing white like the innocent she's never been. The congregation erupted in shocked whispers. Several people stood, moving toward the doors. Others remained frozen, in their pews, watching the drama unfold. Cain, please, Cordelia whispered, her mask finally slipping completely. I loved you. Everything I did was because I loved you. You don't know what love is? He replied. Love doesn't destroy innocent people to get what it wants. Love doesn't lie and manipulate and murder. I didn't murder anyone, she cried. Didn't you? Cain stepped closer, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You put that rope around her neck as surely as if you tied the knot yourself. Church had become a courtroom, with God himself as witness to the judgment being rendered. Cordelia Thorne stood exposed before her community, her wedding dress suddenly looking less like bridal white and more like a burial shroud. You want to know what love looks like? Cain reached into his coat and pulled out Lirelei's final letter, the one she'd never had the chance to deliver. This is love. A woman who worked her fingers to the bone for 5 years, who refused every suitor, who kept a candle burning in a convent window because she'd made a promise to a boy who carved their initials in a windowsill. He began to read aloud, his voice breaking on the words that revealed Lirelei's pure heart, her desperate hope, her willingness to disappear forever rather than burden him with a love he no longer wanted. With each sentence, Cordelia's crimes became more apparent, her jealousy and greed laid bare before the entire town. When he finished, silence stretched like a taut wire. Then, from the back of the church, an unexpected voice spoke up. She was a saint, that girl. Old Mrs. Patterson, the pastor's widow, rose shakily to her feet. Used to send money to the orphanage every month, even when she was barely scraping. By in St. Louis. Never missed a payment, not even when her mother was dying. Always asked about Cain in her letters, added Mrs. Chen from the Mercantile. Wanted to know if he was well, if he was happy. Never asked about other girls. Never pried. Just wanted to know he was safe. More voices joined in, painting a picture of Lirelei's character that made Cordelia look like the devil herself by comparison. The woman who'd thought she'd won everything found herself facing the judgment of an entire community. I want an annulment, Cain said suddenly, his voice cutting. Through the testimonials, this marriage was based on fraud and murder. I'll not be bound to a woman who killed the only person I've ever loved. You can't. Cordelia's composure finally shattered completely. I'm your wife now. We're married in the eyes of God. God sees everything, Preacher Morrison said quietly, his face grave with understanding, including the sin that brought you to this altar. I'll not bind what the Lord himself would tear asunder. This isn't over, Cordelia hissed, her beauty twisting into something ugly and desperate. My father will destroy you. Will take your ranch, your badge, everything you, the sharp crack of a rifle shot from outside the church, cut her off mid-sentence. Then another, and another. Cain's deputies burst through the doors, their faces grim. Sheriff, the Thorne Ranch is on fire. Looks like the whole spread's going up. Through the church windows, they could see smoke rising in the distance. Black. Against the autumn sky, Cordelia stared in horror as her family's legacy burned, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. Convenient, Cain said mildly, though his expression remained cold as winter steel. Seems like justice has a way of finding those who deserve it. You did this, she whispered. You burned us out. I was right here getting married, Cain. replied. Whole church full of witnesses. He turned to his deputies. Better ride out and see if there's anything we can do to help. Shame when a family loses everything to an accident. As his men filed out, Cain looked one last time at the woman who destroyed his happiness. Cordelia Thorne stood in her ruined wedding dress, her father's empire burning, her lies exposed, her future crumbling around her like ash. You want to know what your mistake was? He asked quietly. You thought love was something you could buy or steal or manipulate into existence? But real love, the kind Lirelei and I had, can't be destroyed by lies. It just waits. Patient. Stone, faithful as sunrise. He walked past her toward the church doors, then stopped and turned back one final time. There's a train to California leaving tonight. I suggest you be on it. Because if you're still in my territory come morning, I might not be feeling so charitable. Cordelia opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She was finished, and they both knew it. As Cain stepped out into the crisp autumn air, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 days. Peace. Justice had been served. The truth had been told. And though Lirelei was gone, her memory was finally free from the poison that had killed her. The sun was setting behind the mountains as Cain rode out to the old Brennan farmhouse one last time. He'd spent the day dealing with the aftermath of Cordelia's hasty departure on the evening train. The investigation into the Thorne Ranch fire that would conveniently find no evidence of arson. The paperwork that would officially clear Lirelei's name in the town records. But now, in the golden hour when shadows grew long and the world seemed to hold its breath between day and night, he needed to say goodbye properly. He'd brought flowers, wild roses from the meadow where they'd first kissed. Baby's breath from her mother's garden. Forget-me-nots from the creek bank where they'd built their swing. A bouquet worthy of the woman who'd been worth more than all the gold in Colorado. The farmhouse looked different somehow, touched by the dying light, less abandoned, more peaceful. As if Lirelei's spirit had finally found rest now that the truth was known. Cain knelt by the creek and laid the flowers on the grass where she'd taken her last breath. The water murmured softly over the stones, the same sound that had accompanied their childhood conversations about the future they'd planned to build together. I kept the promise, he said quietly. I know you died thinking I'd broken it, but I kept it. I would have waited forever if I'd had to. The wind stirred the grass, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. Somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang its liquid notes into the gathering dusk. Cordelia's gone. Jeremiah Pike's in jail for perjury and fraud. The whole territory knows what kind of woman you really weren't that I ever doubted. Reached out and touched the carved initials on the nearby tree, worn smooth by weather and time. Doc Hennessy's writing up a new report that tells the truth about how you died. You'll be buried proper tomorrow, with the whole town there to pay respects. Shooting star blazed across the purple sky, bright and brief and beautiful. Cain smiled through his tears, remembering how Lirelei used to make wishes on falling stars when they were children. I'm not sure what comes next, he admitted. Can't say I have much appetite for staying sheriff in a place that holds so many memories. Might sell the ranch, head west to California, start over somewhere that doesn't echo with your laughter. Creek chuckled over its stones, and for a moment, just a moment, he could almost hear her voice in the water's song. Follow your heart, my love. Be happy. I don't know how to be happy without you, he whispered. But even as he said the words, he felt something shifting inside him. Not healing, it was too soon for that, but a kind of acceptance. Lirelei wouldn't want him to waste his life mourning what could never be. She'd want him to live, to love again if he could, to honor their memory by finding joy somewhere in the wide world. As he rose to leave, something caught his eye. The growing wild beside the creek was a patch of flowers he'd never noticed before. Tiny white blooms that seemed to glow in the twilight, delicate as lace, sweet as first love. Lirelei's tears. The old women called them a flower that bloomed only in places where true love had been lost, where hearts had been broken by fate rather than choice. They said if you found them growing wild, it meant the love that caused them would bloom again someday in this life. Or the next. Cain picked one small blossom and tucked it into his vest pocket, close to his heart. Then he mounted his horse and rode back toward town. leaving the past sleeping peacefully by the creek. 3 months later, a letter arrived at the Millbrook Hollow post office addressed to Sheriff Kane Hollister. It was from a cattle ranch outside Sacramento, California, offering him a position as foreman. Good pay, honest work, a chance to start fresh in a land where no one knew his story. At the bottom of the letter, in a woman's delicate handwriting, was a postscript. My brother tells me you're a man of honor who suffered a great loss. I understand something about broken hearts and new beginnings. If you're looking for peace, you'll find it here, among the Golden Hills. Evangeline Ross Kane read the letter 3 times, then walked to the window and looked out at the farmhouse in the distance. The white flowers still bloomed by the creek. Sometimes on quiet evenings he could swear he heard Liralay's laughter carried on the wind. Be happy, her voice seemed to whisper. Love again, live. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Kane Hollister turned in his badge, sold his ranch to a young couple from Denver, and boarded the westbound train. In his pocket was Liralay's final letter, a pressed white flower, in the hope that somewhere in California's Golden Hills, a new chapter of his story was waiting to be written. The love he'd shared with Liralay would live. Forever in the carved initials by the creek, in the flowers that bloomed each spring, in the promise that true love, once born, never truly ends. It just transforms, like a shooting star, becoming part of the eternal sky, waiting to shine again. When the heart is ready to see its light,